Cults are a classic enemy for a D&D campaign, but that also makes them kind of boring. The red hoods and ritual daggers are predictable cliches that don't excite players. Are there any new ideas for cults in D&D 5e? Are religious cults just dictatorships by another name? Do any cults worship the Fey? Well, this video is going to find out. My name is Ben Byrne, and these are new ideas for D&D cults that your players won't see coming. You decide three things when you make a D&D cult. Who is the cult leader? What do they promise to their followers? And what deeds do they ask their followers to commit? Religious institutions resemble cults because they have these three things. Cult leaders are revered by their followers, like a congregation worships a god. Often a cult leader is a prophet whose teachings may reflect the will of a god, but in D&D, a religious cult leader could be a priest or a literal archangel or the deity themselves. In this previous video about D&D cults, we explored how a cult operates by making promises to its followers in exchange for demands that seem reasonable at first. Religions usually promise things like safety, prosperity, and importantly, salvation, but only if the community lives and behaves how the god or the church leaders dictate.
You will be rescued from the fires of the afterlife.
But only if you live a virtuous life, and of course pray to the gods, and of course pay taxes to the church. Who wouldn't want eternal salvation in exchange for a little money? But then the church raises its taxes, and the church begins to demand more from you. You will only be saved from the fires of the afterlife if you expel dangerous heretics from the community. But fear not, the church can identify them for you. In fact, those heretics are communing with demons as we speak. They must be stopped or they will conjure monsters into the mortal realm itself. Notice how the demands of the church escalates from paying a few coins and saying a few prayers to hunting heretics in your community. It's this slow escalation of demands, balancing both promises of safety and fear of perceived threats that allows cult-like religions to control their followers. It's not the blood sacrifices and the slow chanting that makes a cult frightening. It's the spreading of ideology that turns reasonable folk into fanatics. D&D cults are usually secretive cabals hiding in caves, worshipping monsters. But the most dangerous cults are those whose ideas are mainstream, like a religion. In Grimhollow, arguably the most dangerous cult are a religion called the Watchers of the Faithful. The Watchers arose in the aftermath of the God's End. With no gods to pray to for protection, the people of Ethros were afraid for their lives and their very souls. Do the heavens exist without the gods? The Watchers of the Faithful stepped in to fill that spiritual void, instructing their followers to instead pray to the Arch-Seraphs, the lieutenants of the dead gods. The Watchers collect church taxes and they forbid blasphemy. And all of these are reasonable requests for divine protection. Where the Watchers' ideology turns to zealotry is in the condemnation of magic. The church preaches that arcane and primal mages lure monsters into the mortal realm when they reach into the planes to draw power. Mages invite calamity by weakening the barriers between worlds. And if you believe these teachings from your church leaders are true, why wouldn't you want to arrest and burn every mage who recklessly wields arcane magic and puts everybody's life at risk? At its most cult-like, entire settlements influenced by the Watchers violently persecute their own citizens who have even a hint of magic about them. So how does your party fight a cult as mainstream as a nation's main religion? Perhaps your party works to smuggle persecuted groups away from the cult, such as protecting mages from the Watchers of the Faithful's military branch, the Arcanist Inquisition. Folk that may need to be hidden or protected could include your own party members, making this campaign kind of feel like Star Wars Rebels versus the Empire, where you have to keep the Jedi hidden from Darth Vader. Alternatively, your campaign could start in a neighboring realm, and this adventure is about stopping the religious cult's zealotry spreading into your nation. Individual congregations might spring up in small villages at first, before growing in larger cities. Can you prove this church brings a violent ideology before the cult begins to worm its way into positions of power, including the nobility into its ranks? The other thing I like about this cult is that it kind of flips the script on traditional D&D. Your party will be fighting against priests, paladins, and maybe even seraphs instead of demons and monsters. The Grim Hollow Monster Grimoire is of course filled with suitable stat blocks. An Eye of Zabriel is a tiny celestial that makes an incredibly thematic familiar for a cult priest, cleric, or an inquisitor, while an Avarice Seraph could be sent to collect unpaid church taxes from certain communities. The mage hunters of the Arcanist Inquisition make excellent foot soldiers and could be led by a celestial Empyrean knight who is magic resistant and can't flee from battle until one side or the other lays dead. In fact, perhaps you want your cult to be entirely militaristic, formed in the ranks of a nation's army.
Drink the vision mead of knowledge, to learn what it is to live and die in honor, to be in battle slain and in death rewarded by the Valkyrie's embrace. You are dogs that wish to become men. Prove you are not a dog.
The desire for strength is not a moral failing. It's an evolutionary trait. Strength keeps you safe. Strength ensures you can defend your home and defend your family. These are the values that entice soldiers of the Burak Empire to join the Cult of Tormak. And it's an incredibly powerful message. The Burak Empire is fractured by civil war and besieged from within by monsters. Valikan raiders arrive from the north to burn villages and plunder resources. And from the east is the rising shadow of Astoya, where vampires rule the land. Their bloodlust threatens to spill into Burak lands, where they will feed on your sons and daughters. Tormak is a deity and a cult leader who promises strength to their followers. The strength to defend your homes. The strength to defeat your foes. If you live in a nation that's constantly under attack and your military seems useless to protect you, why wouldn't you join a movement promising to do the job better? In fact, the Cult of Tormak is so popular within the Burak military that it threatens to replace worship of the Arc-Seraphs as the dominant religion, despite the fact that folk who worship Tormak are branded as heretics. When the war god Maligant died, his two lieutenants competed for his title as God of War, the Arc-Seraphs Imperius and Tormak. Imperius embodies bravery, righteousness, and honor. Tormak applauds strength, aggression, and violence. Because the truth of war is violence. The only virtue is to kill. The only victory is to survive. Honor and righteousness are illusions for moral cowards who whimper that Tormak is no seraph but a demon. And it's this ideology that makes the Cult of Tormak extremely dangerous. Tormak entices patriotic warriors who wish for the strength to defend their homes, and then slowly twists these brave souls into cruel and bloodthirsty cultists. Newer cult members might simply wear a trinket of Tormak for strength in battle, like a Viking wears the Hammer of Thor. More deeply indoctrinated cultists are encouraged to sacrifice a horse before battle and drench their face in its blood to arouse their violent warrior spirit and frighten their enemies. And soldiers who devote themselves fully to Tormak murder injured foes and even allies on the battlefield rather than taking any prisoners or nursing wounded comrades. Ultimately, Tormak believes that violence is the only purpose of war. You win a battle or you die. Tormak craves blood, just like I crave likes and comments on this video. The Cult of Tormak takes the instinct for self-defense and twists it into a violent and merciless ideology. And these cultists aren't hooded priests. They're trained warriors. A D&D campaign that's about defeating a Cult of Tormak doesn't include sneaking into ocean caves or eldritch temples to stop elder gods being summoned. It's a campaign about civil war as an army is fractured by splintering ideologies and defeating an enemy who will fight in a frenzy until the moment they are slain. Your characters might break a siege, raid supply lines, or assassinate Tormak's generals. Fortunately, for a story of this scale, there are plenty of stat blocks to use. The Grim Hollow Monster Grimoire, once again, has 3 dedicated Tormak cultist stat blocks, including the Cultist, the Zealot, and the Champion of Tormak. The Cultists are the basic foot soldiers, while the Zealots are like a war cleric, inspiring their allies to greater feats of blood-soaked violence and casting support spells. The Champion of Tormak resembles a paladin, clad in splint armor and able to deal significant damage with Hunter's Mark, magic weapon, and of course, smites. In fact, Tormak actually makes for a fantastic deity for your Path of the Zealot Barbarian, Fiend Patron Warlock, or Grim Hollow's Oath of Slaughter Paladin, which you can check out here. But of course, you can flesh out your Tormak-like cult with any of the other humanoid stat blocks in the 2025 Monster Manual, alongside other fiendish monsters. A gore elemental from the Monster Grimoire spawns from the butchered bodies of those slain in battle against Tormak's cultists. And a Lithabel is a fiend filled with the spirits of 2 cultists who slew each other in Tormak's name, but whose skills are too valuable for the archdemon to allow them to die. These and other horrifying creatures you might choose stalk the halls of a fortress held by Tormak soldiers, or could terrorize the cult's enemies on the open battlefield.
Dionysus is hero, but he is also mind breaker. He destroys our self-control.
Self-control is a lover I've known too long, Tommy.
Alright, let's take it down a notch. Your D&D cult doesn't need to be bent on world domination or destruction. Some cults just want to have a good time, which is what your Fey Cult is all about. Base your cult leader on Dionysus, the Greek god of celebration and intoxication. He's a chill party boy who just wants to kick back with a glass of Pinot Gris. But his cult grew out of worshipping the state of intoxication caused by drinking wine. Being drunk is its own form of liberation, frees you from social inhibitions, it eases anxiety, makes you feel happy, encourages dancing, and arouses the spirit. Please drink responsibly. Dionysian cultists, called Maenads, believed drunkenness was a form of divine possession by their deity, and their rituals were more like a rave than a sermon. So you might be wondering, how is a dance party making for a formidable D&D cult? Well, the Maenads were said to get so frenzied in their drunken ecstasy that they would rip animals to bleeding shreds with their bare teeth and hands. They would entwine live snakes in their hair, mingle blood in the wine, and eat raw flesh. This cult entices new followers with the promise of a good time, and then turns them into raving lunatics whose chaotic violence could spread wherever their drunken revelry takes them. In a Greek play called The Bacchae, King Pentheus tries to outlaw this maniacal cult. The king is convinced by a disguised Dionysus to spy on them instead. When Pentheus is discovered as an imposter among the revelry, he is dismembered by the cultists, who then parade his head and limbs through his own city. Among the cultists is Pentheus's own mother, who believes in her drunken ecstasy that she's carrying the head of a lion instead of the head of her son. In your D&D campaign, you could feature a Satyr Revel Master from the 2025 Monster Manual as your Dionysian cult leader. The Satyr plays his melodies from deep within the woods, luring nearby villagers and travelers to join his merry prancing. Those who do never leave the woods again. Your players are hired to investigate the source of missing villagers. Or perhaps the villagers aren't missing at all, and they do return to their lives during the work week. But a local lord is concerned his people are exhausted from their nighttime merrymaking, and some mornings the folk return from the woods covered in blood. Rather than risking Pentheus's fate, the lord asks your party of experienced occultists and warriors to rescue the villagers from the cult instead. There are actually a number of Satyr stat blocks between the Monster Manual and Mythic Odysseys of Theros to fill out an entire cult leadership based on a Dionysian cult. The Archfey Warlock from Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse could also make a great cultist lieutenant. Alternatively, a Spring Eladrin from the same book could make a great high-tier cult leader if you want your Fey cult to have a more mystical, mellow vibe. This alluring scion of the Fey courts might lead their cultists in a rapturous celebration of nature. The cultists may never wish to return to civilization unless it's to bring more folk to the Eladrin's light, and are violently defensive of their Fey leader if anybody tries to interfere. Speaking about Dionysian celebrations also reminded me of that scene from Robert Eggers' The Witch, where the women are dancing naked in the forest around a boiling cauldron. An arch hag, or honestly any hag stat block for any tier of play you want to play at, could form a really witchy feeling cult who maybe draw less attention to themselves than a Dionysian satyr-led cult. The cultists are recruited with similar promises of escaping into the woods from societal oppression, drinking an intoxicating potion brewed in the hag's cauldron. But to gather the ingredients for this potion, the hag orders the cultists to perform increasingly vile deeds, such as cursing chickens to hatch dead fetuses, or capturing a human for sacrifice. To make a hag a truly terrifying cult leader, you should watch this video exploring hag mythology and how to use it to make them a memorable D&D villain. Or you can learn more about the psychology of D&D cults by watching this video and what actually makes them formidable foes for your campaign. Hint, it's not the hoods or snake daggers.